Fantasy Football Hub are currently offering any FPL TV viewer a huge 50% pre-season discount on their annual packages. By becoming a member, you'll gain access to one of the biggest FPL communities, with extensive Opta stats, player comparisons, fixture tickers, planning spreadsheets, community WhatsApp groups, and even team reveals every game week from some of the world's best FPL managers. To get signed up and receive a 50% discount this pre-season, then simply click the link in the description box below. Hey guys, and welcome back to FPL TV. In this 3-part mini-series over the next few days, I'm going to be quickly analysing the 3 promoted clubs, Fulham, Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, just to give you an idea of what to expect of the Premier League new boys for the upcoming FPL season. As I said last time I did this series, the general consensus at the start of the FPL season amongst managers is to perhaps adopt a more wait-and-see strategy before considering players from these promoted clubs. And overall, I think that's probably fair, especially considering this season, where FPL have priced lots of other more established players at a very affordable price. With that said though, even if you're not interested in promoted players for Game Week 1, it can't hurt to go into the new season with as much information as possible, and hopefully, at the very least, this series can provide you with a few options to at least look out for and put on your watch list for later. Before starting, I also want to point out that I'm no expert on these 3 clubs, but I have put lots of work and research into their promotion campaign, so I hope I do your club justice. The most important part for me is simply that you enjoy the video and find it useful. And if you do, the best thing you can do to support my channel is simply leave a like, get subscribed to FPL TV, and then hit the notification bell so you always know when a new video goes live. Today, we'll be kicking off this mini-series with playoff winners Nottingham Forest, as they head into their first Premier League campaign for 23 years. Forest started their championship campaign last season in horrendous form, where under their manager Chris Hughton, they only picked up 1 point from their opening 7 games, 1 draw and 6 defeats. Their worst start to a season for 108 years. Disaster. During that nightmare opening 7 games, Forest were nervous, they lacked confidence and fluidity, and had no real plan B. They were generally playing a 4-2-3-1, and notably were moving star man Brennan Johnson all over the shop to lots of different positions, failing to get the best out of him. Sitting rock bottom of the championship, Steve Cooper was then appointed in September, and Forest never really looked back, and they soon became one of the most exciting, entertaining counter-attacking teams in the league. That's the first point I think is important to make when speaking about Forest. It's the sheer impact that now manager Steve Cooper had on this team, and that can't be underestimated. As shown on screen, Cooper swiftly moved to a back 3, played 2 central midfielders and adopted a 3-4-1-2 formation. This shored up the defence significantly, and having lost 6 of their opening 7 games, under Steve Cooper, they then only lost 6 more from the remaining 39. A huge impact. Looking at their defensive stats from last season is certainly interesting. Nothing spectacular here, but of course the stat that really stands out is goals conceded, only conceding 40 in 46 league games, the second best record in the division. This though is even more impressive considering they conceded 12 of these goals all in that nightmare opening 7 games, and therefore under Steve Cooper only conceded 28 more in the remaining 39. The other stats don't make for great reading though, and it's their expected goals conceded that is considerably higher. According to this data, they conceded 40 goals but were expected to concede 56, and they also conceded a lot of shots as well, so that's a bit of a concern. Does this mean they were a bit fortunate not to concede more? Well, that I'm not sure of. But what this does say for certain is a lot about their goalkeeper Bryce Samba, who was an outstanding shot stopper and had a league-high 80% save percentage. Their keeper Bryce Samba is now sadly no longer at the club, and that's no doubt a big loss, and probably he'd have been quite popular in FPL. But Forest have replaced him with the very solid Dean Henderson in goal, and if they can replicate these kind of stats for the upcoming season, then who knows, he could be a very good differential between the sticks. They were tough to beat, didn't concede many goals, and yet conceded so many shots. And that combination could bode very well for Henderson in racking up save points this season as well as a few clean sheets. As mentioned, upon his appointment, Steve Cooper moved immediately to a back 3 and played 2 central midfielders. This tighter, more centralised formation therefore squeezed a lot of play into the centre of the park, and notably this was key in then leaving bags of space available for the wing-backs in wide areas and gave them so much licence to bomb forward. Incredibly, 78% of Forest chances came from the flanks, the joint most of the division, and this is very important to know. This can also be seen in their defenders' stats specifically, with Jed Spence at right wing back last season, who was ever present, scoring twice, assisting 5, and notably creating 45 chances. The on-loan Löwe on the other side also racked up assists, bagging 4 in just 20 appearances. It is worth noting that lots of these defenders are no longer at the club, but the important takeaway here is how this style of play clearly benefited the wing-backs, and why new signing Neco Williams, who's just 4 million in FPL, could be a very exciting budget prospect this season. Due to so many of their attacks coming from the wide areas, however, this therefore meant there wasn't really an abundance from midfield, and this is probably the area from Forest that is least appealing FPL-wise. Looking into the stats of the midfielders, it's clear that James Garner was the creative engine here, with 8 assists and an outstanding 88 chances created, by far the best. Once again though, and this is becoming a bit of a recurring theme in this video, he too was a loanee at Forest last season and is no longer at the club, so he'll be another big miss. Ryan Yates did well here to bag 8 goals last season, not a bad return, and did feature in the Championship Team of the Season last year. So for clearly an important player who did improve on his goal threat last season, well, 5 million isn't too bad, especially for what looks to be a guaranteed reliable starter. It's likely Yates will be overlooked though, simply because his teammate Jack Colback has come in at 0.5 million cheaper in FPL. Is Colback guaranteed of minutes like Yates seems to be? Well, probably not, especially considering Colback was utilised at times at left wing back last season, and Forest have just signed a new one. Colback's appeal is simply that he's the cheapest midfielder in the game, and therefore managers want him as a potentially reliable backup instead to spend the extra 0.5 million. As for their forwards last year, well, this is where arguably their most important player and talisman featured, with the very talented Brennan Johnson playing a huge part in Forest's eventual promotion. The 21-year-old winger, who was often used as a centre-forward last year, finished the season with a respectable 16 goals, the club's top scorer, but notably was also top for assists as well on 9, clearly the biggest threat in both respects. What I do like about Johnson in particular as well is that he featured in every game for Forest, featuring in all 46 league fixtures and also all 3 playoff games, just emphasising his sheer importance to the team, and that's a credit to his fitness too. It also shows the trust that manager Steve Cooper has in him, and that guarantee of minutes is always good from an FPL perspective. Although Johnson is without doubt one to watch, and although I don't want to take anything away from him, the only issue here for me initially is his price of 6 million, as I was kind of hoping he'd come in at 5.5 or even as a midfielder. There's no doubting Johnson had a super season, but 16 goals doesn't exactly jump off the page, and when considering that Dominic Solanke at Bournemouth got 29 goals for the same price of 6 million, or Mitrovic at Fulham got a staggering 43 for just 0.5 million more, that's what worries me slightly in terms of value for money. Forest have just spent big money on a new centre-forward too, which means Johnson could possibly no longer be the primary outlet for goals, or at least start to share that responsibility, so we'll have to see how that partnership develops. There's no doubting though, he's a huge talent and can only get better. He's one I'm sure will feature in some FPL squads at some point during the season, so certainly keep an eye out for Brennan Johnson. As we look towards Forest's attacking stats in general now, well, there's nothing particularly outstanding here on paper. As we've established, they were predominantly a counter-attacking team, so never really dominated possession, and in general there's still lots to be desired going forward. 60 big chances created was only 10th best last season, and their shots inside the box per game at 6.4 left them in 13th, so it's not great reading for their attacking options. They did, however, despite this, manage 71 goals, 3rd best behind only the 2 other promoted teams, and this for me is what makes Forest so impressive. In all the underlying data we've looked at today for both defensive and attacking, they weren't the best. And yet for the real stats that do count, such as goals and goals conceded, well, they were right up there. It basically shows us they overperformed their underlying numbers in both instances. And again, this surely has to go down to their belief, their confidence, and the pure spirit that Steve Cooper brought to this young group. And to sum up this quick analysis video, that's what I expect to see from Forest next season. Granted, they're probably not going to dominate the underlying data, but they're going to show us a lot of team spirit and togetherness. If last season is anything to go by, the statistics may not look great, but they're going to be tenacious, they're going to be tricky and difficult to beat, and when given the chance, they're going to be fearless to catch teams out on the counter in wide areas, with their wing-backs potentially their key attacking threat. On the downside though, it's important to remember they do have to replace a lot of important players from last season, with the likes of Bryce Samba, Jed Spence, James Garner, Max Löwe and Zinkernagel all no longer at the club as things stand. They'll be without a lot of their important players from last season, and that could be their downfall if they don't adjust quickly. That is probably what makes Forest even more of a wait and see, because there'll be plenty of new faces to bed in. So hopefully you enjoyed this short look at Nottingham Forest from an FPL perspective. I hope it's given you at the very least a bit more insight into what to expect from Forest next season, and if so, please support my channel by getting subscribed to FPL TV. The next episode of this mini-series will be out very soon, so be sure as well to hit the notification bell so you'll then be notified when it goes online. I've also already produced plenty of other pre-season content so far, so I'll put some of those videos on the screen for you now. FPL responsibly, and I'll catch you all for part 2.